Few historic places ignite the imagination as quickly as the mention of Babylon. What was it? Where is it? What makes it so very special? Let's dive deeper into this ancient empire's mysteries and wonders. Babylon was the capital city of the Babylonian Empire, which refers to either of two different empires in the Mesopotamian area during ancient times. These two empires gained regional supremacy between the 19th and 15th centuries BC, and again between the 7th and 6th centuries BC. The city, constructed along both banks of the Euphrates River, had steep barriers to control the river's seasonal floods. The earliest known mention of Babylon as a small town appears on a clay tablet from the reign of Sargon of Akkad of the Akkadian Empire. The site of the ancient city lies just south of present-day Baghdad. The town's last known record of occupancy dates from the 10th century AD, when it was referred to as the small village of Babel. The town became part of a small independent city-state with the rise of the first Babylonian dynasty in the 19th century BC. The Amorite king Hammurabi established the short-lived Old Babylonian Empire in the 18th century BC. He constructed Babylon into a major city and proclaimed himself its king. Southern Mesopotamia became known as Babylonia, and Babylon eclipsed Nippur as the region's holy city. The empire weakened under Hammurabi's son Samsu-iluna, and Babylon spent long periods under Assyrian, Kassite, and Elamite domination. After the Assyrians had demolished and reconstructed it, Babylon became the capital of the short-lived Neo-Babylonian Empire, a Neo-Assyrian inheritor state. From 609 to 539 BC, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon ranked as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. After the fall of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the city came under the rule of the Sassanid, Parthian, Seleucid, Roman, and Achaemenid empires. The city remains are in modern-day Hilla, Babel Governorate, Iraq, about 53 miles south of Baghdad. Its borders have been founded on the perimeter of the ancient outer city walls, an area of about 2,605 acres. They include a large tell of broken mud brick buildings and debris. The primary sources of details about Babylon: excavation of the site itself, references in cuneiform texts found elsewhere in Mesopotamia, references in the Bible, depictions in other classical writing, especially by Herodotus, and second-hand descriptions, citing the work of Titius and Berosus, present an unfinished and sometimes contradictory picture of the ancient city. Even at its peak in the 6th century BC, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, also known as UNESCO, marked Babylon as a World Heritage Site in 2019. The site welcomes thousands of visitors yearly, almost all of whom are Iraqis. Construction is rapidly increasing, which has caused encroachments on the ruins. History. The first attested recognition of Babylon was in the late 3rd millennium BC during the Akkadian Empire reign of ruler Shar-Kali-Shari, one of whose year names mentions building 2 temples there. Governors ruled Babylon for the empire. Some known governors were Abba, Ita-Ilam, Arsia, Merteli, Pusatutu, and Anabetul. After that, nothing is heard of the city until the term of Sumu-la-El. After around 1950 BC, Amorite empires appeared in Uruk and Larsa in the south. According to a Babylonian date list, Amorite rule in Babylon started with a chieftain named Sumu-abum, who proclaimed independence from the neighboring city-state of Kasalu. Sumu-la-El, whose dates may be simultaneous with those of Sumu-abum, is usually presented as the forerunner of the first Babylonian dynasty. Both are credited with constructing the walls of Babylon. The records depict Sumu-la-El's military victories in establishing a regional sphere of power for Babylon. Babylon was originally a minor city-state and maintained little surrounding territory. Its first 4 Amorite rulers did not carry the title of king. The older and more powerful states of Assyria, Isin, Larsa, and Elam outranked Babylon, until it became the capital of Hammurabi's short-lived empire almost a century later. Hammurabi is renowned for codifying the laws of Babylonia into the Code of Hammurabi. He defeated all of the cities and city-states of southern Mesopotamia, including Isin, Ur, Lhasa, Uruk, Nippur, Eridu, Lagash, Kish, Eshnunna, Adab, Akshak, Shuruppak, Akkad, Bat-Tibira, Girsu, and Sippar, combining them into one kingdom, governed from Babylon. Hammurabi raided and overthrew Elam to the east, Ebla's domains, and Mari to the northwest. After a protracted battle with the powerful Assyrian king Ishtar of the old Assyrian Empire, he forced his inheritor to pay homage. Late in his reign, extending Babylonian power to Assyria's Hessian and Hurrian colonies in Asia Minor. After the reign of Hammurabi, the whole of southern Mesopotamia came to be known as Babylonia, whereas the north had already merged centuries before into Assyria. From this time, Babylon replaced Nippur and Eridu as the primary religious centers of southern Mesopotamia. Hammurabi's kingdom destabilized after his demise. Assyrians conquered and drove out the Babylonians and Amorites. The far south of Mesopotamia broke away, creating the native Sealand dynasty, and the Elamites claimed territory in eastern Mesopotamia. The Amorite dynasty stayed in power in Babylon, which became a small city-state again. Texts from Old Babylon often refer to Shamash, the sun god of Sippar, treated as a supreme god, and Marduk believed his son. Marduk was later promoted to a higher level, and Shamash was lowered, perhaps echoing Babylon's rising political power. Middle Babylon. In 1595 BC, the city was conquered by the Hittite Empire from Asia Minor. After that, Kassites from the Zagros Mountains seized the city of Babylon, renaming it Karduniash, ushering in a dynasty that lasted for 435 years until 1160 BC. Babylon weakened during the Kassite era, and as a consequence, Kassite Babylon began paying tribute to the pharaoh of Egypt, Thutmose III, following his 8th campaign against Mitanni. Kassite Babylon ultimately became subject to the Middle Assyrian Empire to the north and Elam to the east, with both powers competing for possession of the city. By 1155 BC, after repeated attacks and annexing territory by the Assyrians and Elamites, the Kassites were unseated in Babylon. An Akkadian South Mesopotamian dynasty then ruled for the first time. However, Babylon stayed feeble and subject to dominance by Assyria. Its ineffectual native kings could not prevent new waves of foreign West Semitic immigrants from the deserts of the Levant, including the Arameans and Sultans in the 11th century BC. Finally, the Chaldeans in the 9th century BC entered and appropriated areas of Babylonia for themselves. The Arameans briefly ruled in Babylon during the late 11th century BC. Assyrian period. During the reign of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, Babylonia was under constant Assyrian authority or direct control. During the reign of Sennacherib of Assyria, Babylonia was in a continual state of revolt, led by a chieftain named Merodach-Baladan, in partnership with the Elamites. It was stopped only by the destruction of the city of Babylon. In 689 BC, its temples, walls, and palaces were demolished, and the debris was thrown into the Araktu, the sea adjoining the earlier Babylon on the south. The devastation of the religious center stunned many, and the succeeding murder of Sennacherib by 2 of his sons while praying to the god Nisroch was deemed an act of penance. Consequently, his successor, Esarhaddon, hurried to reconstruct the old city and make it his home for part of the year. After his death, Babylonia was ruled by his elder son, the Assyrian prince Shamash-Shum-Ukin, who ultimately started a civil war in 652 BC against his brother Ashurbanipal, who governed in Nineveh. Shamash-Shum-Ukin enlisted the help of other peoples against Assyria, including Persia, the Chaldeans, Elam, and sultans of southern Mesopotamia, and the Canaanites and Arabs residing in the deserts south of Mesopotamia. Once again, Babylon was surrounded by the Assyrians, starved into submission, and its supporters were beaten. Ashurbanipal celebrated a service of reconciliation, but did not venture to take the hands of Bel. An Assyrian governor named Kandalanu was selected as monarch of the city. Ashurbanipal did collect texts from Babylon for inclusion in his extensive library at Nineveh. After the death of Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian Empire was destabilized because of a string of internal civil wars throughout the rule of the Assyrian kings Ashur-etilivani, Sin-Sharishkan, Sin-Shumulisha. Eventually, like many other parts of the Near East, Babylon took advantage of the chaos within Assyria to liberate itself from Assyrian rule. The Babylonians saw another instance of holy retribution in the ensuing overthrow of the Assyrian Empire by an association of peoples. Neo-Babylonian Empire. Under Nabopolassar, a previously Chaldean king, Babylon escaped Assyrian rule and, in association with Saxars, king of the Medes, who was his son-in-law together with Sumerians, finally conquered the Assyrian Empire between 612 BC and 605 BC accordingly. Babylon became the Neo-Babylonian capital, sometimes called the Chaldean Empire. With the retrieval of Babylonian independence, a new generation of architectural activity transpired, especially during the reign of his son Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar demanded the complete reconstruction of the imperial grounds, including the Etemenanki Ziggurat and the construction of the Ishtar Gate, the most notable of 8 gates around Babylon. A reconstruction of the Ishtar Gate is located in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. Nebuchadnezzar is also credited with building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, said to have been created for his homesick wife, Amytis. Whether the gardens existed is a matter of debate. German archaeologist Robert Koldewey supposed that he had uncovered its foundations, but many historians argue about the site. Stephanie Daly has contended that the Hanging Gardens were located in the Assyrian capital Nineveh. Nebuchadnezzar is also notoriously associated with the Babylonian exile of the Jews, the result of an imperial pacification method also used by the Assyrians, in which ethnic groups in overthrown areas were exiled en masse to the capital. According to the Hebrew Bible, he annihilated Solomon's temple and deported the Jews to Babylon. The defeat was also documented in the Babylonian Chronicles. The fall of Babylon. In 539 BC, the Neo-Babylonian Empire fell to Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, with a military engagement known as the Battle of Opis. Babylon's walls were thought impregnable. The only way into the city was through one of its many gates or the Euphrates River. Metal grates were lodged underwater, permitting the river to flow through the city walls while stopping intrusion. The Persians developed a plan to enter the city via the river. During a Babylonian national feast, Cyrus' troops upstream redirected the Euphrates River, allowing Cyrus' soldiers to penetrate the city through the diminished water. The Persian army defeated the city's outlying areas, while most Babylonians at the city center were unaware of the invasion. The report was elaborated upon by Herodotus and noted in parts of the Hebrew Bible. Herodotus also described a moat, an extraordinarily tall and expansive wall cemented with bitumen and structures on top, and 100 gates to the city. He also writes that the Babylonians wear turbans and perfume, and bury their deceased in honey, that they practice ritual prostitution, and that 3 tribes among them eat nothing but fish. 100 gates can be regarded as a reference to Homer. Since the pronouncement of Archibald Henry Sayce in 1883, Herodotus' report of Babylon has primarily been believed to symbolize Greek folklore rather than a genuine journey to Babylon. However, Daly and others have recently suggested taking Herodotus' statement seriously. According to 2 Chronicles 36 of the Hebrew Bible, Cyrus later gave a decree allowing imprisoned people, including the Jews, to return to their lands. Biblical scholars have traditionally seen the text found on the Cyrus cylinder as supporting proof of this policy. However, the interpretation is refuted because the text recognizes only Mesopotamian shelters, but does not mention Jews, Judea, or Jerusalem. Under Cyrus and the subsequent Persian king Darius I, Babylon became the 9th satrapy's capital city, Babylonia's south and Athura's north, and a center of education and scientific progress. In Achaemenid Persia, the ancient Babylonian arts of astronomy and mathematics were revitalized, and Babylonian scholars assembled maps of constellations. The city became the executive capital of the Persian Empire and remained celebrated for over 2 centuries. Many significant archaeological findings have been made that can deliver a better understanding of that period. The early Persian kings had tried to preserve the religious ceremonies of Marduk, who was the most significant god. Still, by the rule of Darius III, overtaxation and the pressure of multiple wars led to a degeneration of Babylon's main sanctums and canals and destabilization of the surrounding region. There were numerous stabs of revolution, and in 522 BC, 521 BC, and 482 BC, native Babylonian kings briefly recovered freedom. However, these revolts were quickly suppressed, and Babylon stayed under Persian rule for 2 centuries until Alexander the Great's entrance in 331 BC. Hellenistic period. In October of 331 BC, Darius III, the last Achaemenid king of the Persian Empire, was conquered by the forces of the ancient Macedonian monarch Alexander at the Battle of Gaugamela. Under Alexander, Babylon again thrived as a center of education and trade. However, after Alexander died in 323 BC in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, his generals separated his empire, and decades of fighting soon started. The ongoing unrest nearly drained the city of Babylon. A tablet dated 275 BC notes that the residents of Babylon were brought to Seleucia, where a castle and a temple were constructed. With this removal, Babylon became inconsequential as a city, although more than a century later, sacrifices were still conducted in its old sanctuary. Renewed Persian rule. Under the Sassanid and the Parthian empires, Babylon, like Assyria, evolved into a region of these Persian empires for 9 centuries, until after 650 AD, although it was seized briefly by Trajan in Ablid 116 to be part of the newly dominated region of Mesopotamia, his inheritor Hadrian abandoned his conquests east of the Euphrates River, which became the Roman Empire's eastern border again. However, Babylon retained its own culture and people who spoke varieties of Aramaic and continued to refer to their homeland as Babylon. Examples of their culture are the Babylonian Talmud, the Gnostic Mandaean religion, Eastern Rite Christianity, the faith of the philosopher Mani. Christianity was presented to Mesopotamia in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, and Babylon was the seat of a bishop of the Church of the East until well after the Arab Islamic conquest. Coins from the Parthian, Sasanian, and Arabic periods unearthed in Babylon show the continuity of territory there. Muslim conquest. In the mid-7th century, Mesopotamia was raided and settled by the growing Muslim Empire. A period of Islamization ensued. Babylon was disbanded as a province, and Aramaic and Church of the East Christianity ultimately became marginalized. Ibn Hokel and the Arab scholar Al-Qazwini depict Babylon, also known then as Babel, as a little village. The latter described a well referred to as the Dungeon of Daniel that was visited by Christians and Jews during holidays. Muslims visited the grave shrine of Amran ibn Ali. Babylon is noted in medieval Arabic writings as a source of bricks, said to have been used in cities from Baghdad to Basra. European travelers in many cases could not find the city's location or mistook Fallujah for it. Benjamin of Tudela, a 12th century traveler, cites Babylon, but it is vague if he went there. Others referred to Baghdad as Babylon or New Babylon and related various constructions encountered in the area as the Tower of Babel. Pietro della Valle journeyed to the village of Babel in Babylon in the 17th century and noted the presence of baked and dried mud bricks cemented with bitumen. Lion of Babylon. The 18th century saw a rising flow of travelers to Babylon, including Carsten Niebuhr and Pierre-Joseph de Beauchamp, and measurements of its latitude. Beauchamp's memoir, printed in English in 1792, prompted the British East India Company to direct its agents in Baghdad and Basra to acquire Mesopotamian relics for freight to London. By 1905, there were several villages in Babylon, one of which was Quarish, with about 200 households discovered within the boundaries of the ancient inner city walls. The village grew due to the need for laborers during the German Oriental Society excavations. Excavation and research. Claudius Rich, working for the British East India Company in Baghdad, exhumed Babylon in 1811, 1812, and again in 1817. Captain Robert Mignan examined the site briefly in 1827, and in 1829 he finished a map of Babylon, including the zone of several villages. William Loftus visited there in 1849. Austin Henry Layard made some soundings during a short visit in 1850 before leaving the site. Julius Oppert, Fulgence Fresnel, and Felix Thomas heavily mined Babylon from 1852 to 1854. However, much of their work was lost in the Kurna disaster when a carrier ship and 4 rafts sank on the Tigris River during May 1855. They had been bringing over 200 crates of artifacts from various excavation assignments when Tigris River pirates bombarded them near Al-Kurna. Rescue actions, aided by the Ottoman authorities and British residents in Baghdad, packed the equivalent of 80 crates on a ship for Le Havre in May 1856. Few relics from the Fresnel mission would make it to France. Subsequent efforts to retrieve the lost antiquities from the Tigris, including a Japanese expedition in 1971 and 72, have been largely unsuccessful. George Smith and Henry Rawlinson operated there briefly in 1854. Hormuz Rassam performed the subsequent excavation on behalf of the British Museum. Work started in 1879, persisting until 1882, and was driven by widespread looting of the area. Using industrial-scale digging in pursuit of relics, Rassam retrieved many cuneiform tablets and other discoveries. The zealous excavation techniques, common at the time, caused considerable damage to the archaeological context. Many tablets had materialized on the market in 1876 before Rassam's excavation began. A team from the German Oriental Society, led by Robert Coldry, performed the first scientific archaeological excavations at Babylon. The work was conducted daily from 1889 until 1917. The direct efforts of the day involved the Temple of Marduk and the processional way leading up to it, as well as the city wall. Artifacts were shipped back to Germany, including pieces of the Ishtar Gate and hundreds of retrieved tablets. Coldry's colleague Walter André rebuilt them into exhibitions at the Vorderasiatisches Museum, Berlin. The German archaeologists escaped before oncoming British troops in 1917, and many relics went missing in subsequent years. The site was excavated in 1974 on behalf of the Turin Center for Archaeological Research and Excavations in the Middle East and Asia and the Iraqi-Italian Institute of Archaeological Sciences. The emphasis was on clearing up issues presented by re-examining the old German data. Additional work from 1987 until 89 focused on the area encircling the Ishara and Ninurta temples in the Shu-Ana city quarter of Babylon. During the restoration measures in Babylon, the Iraqi State Organization for Antiquities and Heritage completed comprehensive research, excavation, and clearing. Still, the wider publication of these archaeological activities has been capped. Indeed, most of the known tablets from all modern excavations stay unpublished. Iraqi government. The site of Babylon has been an artistic investment to Iraq since the creation of the modern Iraqi state in 1921. The site was officially guarded and mined by the Kingdom of Iraq under the British administration, which later became the Hashemite Kingdom of Iraq and its successors. The Iraqi Republic, Ba'athist Iraq, also officially called the Iraqi Republic, the Republic of Iraq, and the Arab Federation. Babylonian images sometimes appear on Iraqi stamps and postcards. In the 1960s, a reproduction of the Ishtar Gate and a reconstruction of Ninmak Temple were created on site. On February 14, 1978, the Ba'athist government of Iraq under Saddam Hussein started the Archaeological Restoration of Babylon project, rebuilding features of the ancient city atop its ruins. These features incorporated the southern palace of Nebuchadnezzar, with 250 rooms, 5 courtyards, and a nearly 99-foot entrance arch. The project also strengthened the processional way, the Lion of Babylon, and an amphitheatre built during the city's Hellenistic era. In 1982, the government minted a set of 7 coins depicting iconic features of Babylon. A Babylon International Festival was held during September 1987 and annually after that until 2002 to showcase this work. The suggested reconstruction of the Hanging Gardens and the Great Ziggurat never happened. Hussein nestled a picture of himself and Nebuchadnezzar at the entrance to the ruins and carved his name on many bricks in imitation of Nebuchadnezzar. One recurring inscription reads, "This was built by Saddam Hussein, son of Nebuchadnezzar, to glorify Iraq." These bricks became sought after as collector's objects after Hussein's defeat. Similar projects were completed at Nineveh, Nimrod, Asa, and Hatra to display the magnificence of Arab achievement. In the 1980s, Saddam Hussein removed the village of Quresh, expelling its residents. He later built a modern palace in that area called Saddam Hill over some old ruins in the pyramidal style of a ziggurat. In 2003, he planned to have a cable car line built over Babylon, but Iraq's 2003 invasions terminated projects. Under US and Polish occupation, after Iraq's 2003 invasions, the region around Babylon came under the control of US troops before being given over to Polish forces in September 2003. US forces under General James T. Conway of the 1 Marine Expeditionary Force was blamed for building the military base Camp Alpha with a helipad and other facilities on ancient Babylonian ruins during the Iraq War. US forces have inhabited the site for some time and have caused irreparable harm to the archaeological record. In a report of the British Museum's Near East Department, Dr. John Curtis explained how aspects of the archaeological site were demolished to create a landing area for helicopters and parking lots for heavy vehicles. Curtis wrote of the occupation forces. They caused substantial damage to the Ishtar Gate, one of the most famous monuments from antiquity. US military vehicles crushed 2,600-year-old brick pavements. Archaeological fragments were scattered across the site. More than 12 trenches were driven into ancient deposits, and military earth-moving projects contaminated the area for future generations of scientists. A US military spokesman declared that engineering procedures were discussed with the head of the Babylon Museum. The head of the Iraqi State Board for Heritage and Antiquities, Donnie George, said that the mess will take decades to sort out and criticized Polish troops for causing terrible damage to the site. Poland decided to place the city under Iraq's command in 2004. It authorized a report titled Report concerning the condition of the preservation of the Babylon archaeological site, which it delivered at a December 2004 meeting. The site was handed over to the Iraqi Ministry of Culture in 2005. In April 2006, Colonel John Coleman, former Chief of Staff for the 1 Marine Expeditionary Force, proposed to offer an apology for the damage done by military personnel under his control. However, he also argued that the US presence had prevented far more significant damage by other looters. An article posted in April 2006 stated that UN officials and Iraqi leaders plan to restore Babylon, making it a cultural center. 2 museums and a library possessing replicas of artifacts and local maps and reports were plundered and demolished. Present day. In May 2009, the provincial government of Babel reopened the site to tourists, and over 35,000 people visited in 2017. An oil pipeline runs through an outer wall of the city. On July 5, 2019, the site of Babylon was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Thousands of people reside in Babylon within the perimeter of the ancient outer city walls. Communities in and around them are rapidly developing from compact, dense settlements to sprawling suburbia despite laws restricting constructions. Modern villages include Zwaya West, Sinjar Village, Querish and Al-Jimma, among which the first 2 are better off economically. Most residents primarily depend on daily wage earning or have government jobs in Al-Hilla, while few cultivate dates, citrus fruits, figs, fodder for livestock, and limited cash crops. However, income from the land alone is not enough to sustain a family. Shia and Sunni Muslims live in Sinjar village, with mosques for both groups. The State Board of Antiquities and Heritage, also known as the SBAH, is the central authority responsible for the conservation of the archaeological site. They are assisted by Antiquity and Heritage Police and maintain a permanent presence there. The World Monuments Fund is also involved in research and conservation. The SBA Provincial Inspectorate Headquarters is located within the boundaries of the ancient inner city walls on the east side. Several staff members and their families reside in subsidized housing in this area. Cultural importance. Before modern archaeological excavations in Mesopotamia, the appearance of Babylon was essentially a mystery and typically envisioned by Western artists as a hybrid between ancient Egyptian, classical Greek, and contemporary Ottoman culture. Due to Babylon's historical significance and references to it in the Bible, the word Babylon in various languages has acquired a generic meaning of a large, bustling, diverse city. Examples include Babylon is used in reggae music as a concept in the Rastafari belief system, denoting the materialistic capitalist world or any form of imperialist evil. It is believed that Babylon actively sought to exploit and oppress the people of the world, specifically people of African descent. Rastafarians believe that Babylon attempts to forbid the smoking of ganja because this sacred herb opens minds to the truth. Freemasonry, which has its versions of biblical legends, classically considered Babylon as its birthplace and a haven for science and knowledge. Babylon 5 is a science fiction series set on a futuristic space station that acts as a trading and diplomatic nexus between many different cultures. Many stories focus on the theme of different societies and cultures uniting, respecting differences, and learning from each other rather than fighting or looking at each other with prejudice and suspicion. Babylon AD takes place in New York City decades in the future. Babylonus, the Lithuanian name for Babylon, is a real estate development in Lithuania. Babylon is a song by Lady Gaga that uses allusions to ancient biblical themes to discuss gossip. The 2021 film The Eternals depicts Babylon on its greatest extent and is shown to be protected and aided in its development by the Eternals. Biblical narrative. In the book of Genesis, Babel, also known as Babylon, is described as founded by Nimrod and Uruk-Akkad, and perhaps Kauno, all of them in Shinar. Another story in Genesis 11 tells a united human race, speaking one language, migrating to Shinar to establish a city and tower, the Tower of Babel. God halts the tower's construction by scattering humanity across the earth and confusing their communication so they cannot understand each other in the same language. After Hezekiah, the king of Judah became ill. Baladan, king of Babylon, sent a letter and gifts to him. Hezekiah showed all of his treasures to the delegation, and the prophet Isaiah later said to him, "Behold, the days are coming when everything that is in your house and what your fathers have stored up to this day will be carried to Babylon. Nothing will be left." Some 200 years later, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, invaded Judah, laid siege to Jerusalem, and deported the Jews to Babylon. The prophet Daniel lived in Babylon for most of his life. Nebuchadnezzar made Daniel ruler over the entire province of Babylon for having interpreted his dream. Years later, Belshazzar held a banquet at which fingers of a hand appeared and wrote on a wall. Daniel was called to provide an interpretation of the writings, upon which he explained that God had put an end to Belshazzar's kingdom. Belshazzar was killed that night, and Darius the Mede took over the domain. The book of Isaiah says the following regarding Babylon: "It will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. No Arab will pitch his tent there. No shepherds will make their flocks lie down there." The book of Jeremiah says that Babylon will never again be inhabited, and that no one will live there, nor will anyone of mankind reside in it, and that it will be a land in which no one of mankind passes. The territories of Babylon, Edom, Bozrah, Moab, Tyre, Hazor, and the sons of Ammon are all predicted in the Bible to become like Sodom and Gomorrah, or uninhabited forever. Several biblical prophecy scholars, most notably Chuck Missler, maintain that the doom of Babylon, described in detail in Isaiah 13 and 14, Jeremiah 50 and 51, and possibly Revelation 17 and 18, must refer to the literal future destruction of an actual city. Missler has written that Babylon has yet to be destroyed as prophesied by Isaiah and Jeremiah. The Persians could take Babylon without a fight in 539 BC. In Jewish tradition, Babylon symbolizes an oppressor against which righteous believers must struggle. In Christianity, Babylon suggests worldliness and evil. Prophecies sometimes symbolically link the kings of Babylon with Lucifer. Nebuchadnezzar II, sometimes conflated with Nabonidus, appears as the foremost ruler in this narrative. The book of Revelation in the Christian Bible refers to Babylon many centuries after it ceased to be a major political center. The city is personified by the whore of Babylon, riding on a scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns and drunk on the blood of the righteous. Some scholars of apocalyptic literature believe this New Testament Babylon to be a dysphemism for the Roman Empire. Other scholars suggest that Babylon in the book of Revelation has a symbolic significance that extends beyond mere identification with the first-century Roman Empire. One thing is certain about Babylon: we're certainly not done learning about it. There's so much more that we can learn from and learn about this incredible place and its surrounding areas.